"We can hire 3 entry-level developers for what you cost," he quipped during my dismissal. No offense, just a financial decision. "My name is Simon Vance, 57 years old, senior software architect at Apex Property Solutions for 19 years. I'd constructed their entire digital framework from the ground up, designed every system upgrade, and ensured everything operated so seamlessly that the leadership forgot how crucial I was until they decided I was too expensive." I sat opposite Marcus Thorne, the new chief information officer who'd been with the company a mere 7 months. He was 43, sported fashionable eyewear, and held an MBA from Wharton. He was brought in to streamline operations, which evidently meant starting with the most seasoned personnel. "The severance terms are quite fair," stated Emily from People Operations, pushing a manila envelope across the conference table. 3 months' pay plus your accrued leave." I nodded, accepted the envelope, and asked, "Is that everything?" Marcus looked almost let down. Perhaps he anticipated an argument or a threat of legal recourse, something to report to the board about my supposed difficult nature. "What would you prefer I say? Most individuals in your situation express questions or concerns." I shrugged. "It seems quite clear to me." Marcus exchanged a look with Emily, who appeared equally baffled by my composure. What they failed to grasp was that I wasn't composed, I was simply finished. "There's a distinction." "Well, we would value your assistance with the handover," Marcus continued. "The new development team will require some orientation on the system's architecture. Perhaps a short-term consulting contract for a couple of weeks?" "I'll consider it," I said, already knowing I wouldn't. We shook hands. I cleared my desk without a fuss. 19 years of effort fit into a single recycled box. I nodded farewell to a few colleagues who awkwardly averted their gaze, likely fearing a similar outcome. As I walked to my sedan in the multi-story car park, my phone vibrated. A message from David, the senior database engineer I'd recruited 13 years prior. "This is Simon, the entire department is in turmoil." I didn't reply. At home, I sat on my patio overlooking the Pacific coastline, sipping a scotch, watching the sunset turn the ocean crimson. My wife Clara placed a hand on my arm. "What's next for you?" I shrugged. "Something will come along." What Marcus didn't know, what he hadn't bothered to discover, was that I hadn't just built their systems. I had custom-programmed extensive sections myself, with minimal formal documentation because the company had consistently declined to fund a dedicated technical writing team. Only I truly understood the intricate redundancies, the concealed security protocols, the complex network design, and I had no intention of explaining it to anyone. Now, I started at Apex Property Solutions back when it was known as Coastal Realty Management, a modest property firm with 5 residential complexes and a handful of staff. Their entire IT setup comprised 3 desktop PCs, a photocopier, and a DSL internet line. The founder, Arthur Finch, hired me away from a freelance project in San Diego. "We're growing," he'd told me. "Need someone who can build us a robust foundation." Over 19 years, I'd transformed that basic arrangement into a comprehensive property management platform that handled everything from prospective tenant screening and credit checks to automated repair dispatch and rental payment processing across 72 properties in 5 states. I'd built it incrementally, adapting, upgrading, and refining as the company expanded. When Arthur retired 6 years ago, his daughter Julia sold the firm to a venture capital group that rebranded it as Apex Property Solutions. They retained me, impressed by what I'd constructed, but things started to shift. New executives, new objectives. Quarterly earnings became more critical than long-term system stability. The warning signs appeared gradually. First, they dismissed my proposal for a technical writing team. Too costly, they stated. We'll address it next fiscal period. That period never arrived. Then they began engaging consultants, young MBA graduates who spoke of disrupting real estate tech and leveraging SaaS platforms. They'd listen to my explanations of our system architecture with vacant stares, then propose off-the-shelf software that wouldn't integrate with our bespoke infrastructure. I kept resisting, explaining why their strategies wouldn't work, showing them the custom code that made our system unique. Eventually, They stopped including me in strategic planning sessions. Clara noticed it before I did. "They're sidelining you," she said one evening. "You need to be ready." I dismissed her concerns. "They need me. No one else understands how the entire system functions cohesively." "That might be precisely the issue," she replied. 7 months ago, they hired Marcus as the new CIO. He came from a fintech company and immediately began discussing standardization and legacy system overhaul. He hired 3 junior developers straight from university, had them shadow me, and ask questions about the system. I answered their queries, but I knew they weren't grasping the inherent complexities. How could they? It had taken me years to build those systems, to understand the interdependencies, to create the redundancies that ensured smooth operation when issues arose. Last Monday, Marcus dropped by my cubicle. "Brief meeting tomorrow morning," he said casually. "Just a quarterly update." I should have anticipated it. The first call arrived 2 weeks after my termination. I was in my study, polishing my CV, when my phone rang. "Marcus Thorne," I let it go to voicemail. "Simon, it's Marcus. We're encountering some difficulties with the resident portal. The junior team is on it, but they're struggling to understand some of your code's architecture. Could you call us back? It would just be a quick consult." I deleted the message and returned to my CV. 3 more calls came that day, each voicemail sounding progressively more urgent. By evening, David texted me. "Systems have been unstable all day. Repair tickets aren't processing. Marcus is losing it." The next morning, Emily from People Operations called. "Simon, I hope you're well. I'm calling because we'd like to discuss a consulting engagement, just temporary, to assist with some current system issues. The remuneration would be quite attractive." I picked up my phone. "How attractive?" $350.00 per hour, minimum 4-hour block. "I'll consider it and let you know," I said, then hung up. I sat at my kitchen island gazing out at the ocean. Clara placed a mug of tea before me. "What are you contemplating?" "I'm contemplating that they're discovering my actual worth." Over the next 3 days, the calls intensified. Marcus, Emily, even Julia Finch, who still held a board seat. The resident portal was malfunctioning. The repair scheduling system was generating errors. The automated payment processing had failed, impacting thousands of occupants. I didn't respond to any of them. On day 4, an email landed from Stratatech Solutions, a regional competitor to Apex. They managed fewer properties but had been expanding aggressively. The email was from their head of technology, Richard Strata himself. "Simon, I heard about your situation at Apex. We've always admired your work from a distance. Would you be interested in discussing opportunities with us? We're looking to overhaul our entire property management infrastructure." I replied and scheduled a meeting for the following day. That evening, as Clara and I were preparing supper, my doorbell chimed. Marcus Thorne stood on my doorstep, his stylish glasses slightly askew, his usually pristine suit creased. "Simon, I apologize for the unannounced visit, but we have an emergency. The entire system is down, nothing is functioning. The team can't identify the problem or how to resolve it." I leaned against the door jamb. "That sounds problematic." "It is. We need your assistance. The board has authorized me to offer you a substantial consulting fee, $550.00 per hour, whatever is necessary." I thought about the recycled box in my garage, 19 years of work reduced to a few keepsakes. I thought about, no offense, just a financial decision. I thought about the technical writing team they'd never approved. "I'm sorry to hear about your difficulties," I said quietly, "but I have an interview scheduled tomorrow. Something will come along, just as I anticipated." I closed the door on his astonished face and returned to making supper. For the first time since my termination, a sense of calm enveloped me. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just clarity. I wasn't going to help them fix what they had broken. The interview with Richard Strata exceeded expectations. We met at a cafe in downtown La Jolla, away from both company HQs. "I've followed your work for years," Richard said, stirring his espresso. "That integrated property management system you built at Apex is legendary in our sector. No one else has anything comparable." "Thank you," I said. It took effort. That's what I want to discuss. Effort. We're looking to build something similar, but we don't want to start from zero. We need someone who understands the architecture, the integration challenges, the security layers, someone who can build us something superior to what's currently available. I'm interested, Richard smiled. Good, because I'm prepared to offer you the position of Chief Technology Architect, full benefits, equity options, and a salary 25% higher than what you were earning at Apex. It was a strong offer, almost too strong. Why me? I asked. There are younger developers available, less expensive ones, Richard chuckled. You sound like your former employer. We attempted that approach, hired 3 bright young developers from prestigious universities. They built us something sleek and modern that fails every time we exceed 150 concurrent users. We don't need inexpensive, we need dependable. I accepted the offer the next day. Meanwhile, Apex's problems were intensifying. David kept me informed through occasional texts. The system had been partially restored, but critical functionalities were still failing. They'd engaged an expensive consulting firm specializing in legacy system recovery. A week after I started at Stratitech, Marcus called again. Simon, please, this is becoming critical. We've lost access to payment records for the past 4 months. Residents are complaining about erroneous charges. The consulting team says they need your input on the database schema. I was tempted to ignore it, but something compelled me to answer. Marcus, I'm employed elsewhere now. Exclusive contract. I'm afraid I can't assist you. We'll triple whatever they're paying you for just 3 days of your time. It's not about the money. Then what is it about? Revenge? Are you deriving pleasure from watching us flounder? I paused, considering my response carefully. No, Marcus, I'm not deriving pleasure from it. But you made a business decision. You decided my experience wasn't worth the expense. Now you're discovering the actual cost of that decision. The board wants to discuss bringing you back. Full salary plus a significant signing bonus. For a moment, I felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it quickly dissipated. Returning would solve nothing. The same executives who deemed me expendable would be awaiting the next opportunity to cut costs. I appreciate the offer, but I've made a commitment to Stratitech Solutions. Marcus's voice hardened. You know, there could be legal repercussions if we determine you intentionally made our systems difficult to maintain. Non-compete agreements, intellectual property issues. There it was, the threat I'd been anticipating. The system is exactly as it was when the company repeatedly denied my requests for a dedicated technical writing team. I replied evenly. Every line of code belongs to Apex, as stipulated in my employment contract. I've taken nothing with me except my experience, but feel free to have your legal counsel contact mine. I hung up, hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from an anger I hadn't permitted myself to feel until now. The accusation that I'd somehow sabotaged them was the ultimate insult. At Stratitech, I was starting anew, building systems correctly from the outset with comprehensive documentation, training programs for the development team, and redundancies that would prevent the kind of catastrophe Apex was experiencing. I wasn't going to look back anymore, but I wasn't going to help them either. Some lessons had to be learned the hard way. A month after joining Stratitech Solutions, I received an unexpected visitor in my new office. David, my former senior database engineer, stood awkwardly in the doorway holding a laptop case. "Time for lunch?" he inquired. Over wraps at a nearby bistro, David updated me on the chaos at Apex. "It's worse than you imagine," he said, lowering his voice despite the bustling lunchtime ambiance. "They've lost access to historical data going back 4 years. The backup systems are somehow corrupted. The consulting firm is saying they might need to rebuild entirely from scratch." I wasn't surprised. The backup system had multiple redundancies and security protocols that needed to be followed precisely. Skip one step and the entire process would fail in a way designed to protect resident data from unauthorized access. "That's not all," David continued. "I found something when I was trying to help the consultants understand the payment processing module. Marcus had been planning your termination for months. He'd been meeting with the board, convincing them that your custom infrastructure was too costly to maintain. How do you know this?" David retrieved his laptop and showed me a series of emails he'd discovered in the system archives. Emails between Marcus and the board discussing the legacy staff optimization plan and specifically naming me as the primary target. He told them they could replace you with less expensive developers and transition to off-the-shelf solutions within 9 months, David said. He projected cost savings of over $1.5 million annually. I read through the emails, feeling a strange detachment. One line from Marcus stood out. Vance's custom systems are unnecessarily convoluted. He's made himself indispensable by design, not necessity. There's more, David said. The venture capital firm that owns Apex is planning to divest. They've been preparing for this for over a year. Marcus was brought in specifically to reduce overhead and make the company appear more profitable before the sale. Now it all made sense. The push for standardization, the resistance to proper documentation, the sudden focus on reducing senior staff expenses. It wasn't about improving the company, it was about dressing it up for a quick sale. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. David closed his laptop. "Because I resigned yesterday, and I'm not the only one. Half the IT department has departed. The consultants are estimating at least 9 months to restore full functionality, maybe longer." He hesitated. "And because Apex's largest client, Horizon Communities, is considering terminating their contract, they've lost faith in the management system." I thought about the implications. Horizon represented nearly 35% of Apex revenue. Losing them would be catastrophic, especially with the sale pending. "What will you do now?" I asked. David grinned. "Actually, I was hoping Stratitech might be hiring senior database engineers." Later that afternoon, I spoke with Richard about bringing David on board. He agreed immediately. We were building a team, piece by piece, with individuals who understood what it meant to create systems that endured. That evening, I received another call from Marcus. This time, his voice had lost its authoritative tone. "Simon, please. The situation is critical. Horizon is threatening to terminate their contract. The board is questioning my judgment. We need your help." "I'm sorry, Marcus, I can't help you." "Name your price. Anything. It's not about price. It's about respect for experience, for the work that goes into building something correctly the first time." The line was silent for a moment. "You knew this would happen," he said finally. "You knew exactly what would fail and when." "No, Marcus, I just knew what I had built and what it took to maintain it, information I attempted to share numerous times." I ended the call feeling neither triumph nor regret, just the quiet certainty that some lessons can only be learned through failure. The opportunity materialized faster than I anticipated. 2 months into my role at Stratitech Systems, Richard summoned me to his office. "I just got off the phone with Charles Horizon," he said, referring to the CEO of Horizon Communities. "They're officially terminating their contract with Apex next month. They want to know if we can handle their portfolio." Horizon Communities managed over 12,000 units across the West Coast. Horizon Communities managed over 12,000 units across the West Coast. It would more than double Stratitech's current operations. "We're not ready for that kind of scale," I admitted. "The new system is progressing, but it's only about halfway there." Richard leaned forward. "What would it take to get ready if we had to?" I considered it. 3 more senior developers, dedicated cloud infrastructure, and at least 10 weeks of development time. Even then, it would be challenging. Charles is desperate. Apex's failures are damaging their reputation with residents. He's willing to give us 14 weeks and fund the infrastructure expansion. This was the moment, the turning point. If Stratitech took on Horizon and succeeded, it would establish us as a significant competitor in the industry. If we failed, it could jeopardize both companies. "Let me think about the architecture," I said. "I'll draft a plan by tomorrow." That night, I barely slept. I sketched system diagrams, mapped data migration pathways, and considered scaling challenges. By morning, I had a plan, ambitious but achievable, a hybrid approach that would allow us to onboard Horizon's properties in stages, minimizing disruption. When I presented it to Richard, he studied it carefully. "This is robust," he said finally. "But I notice you've included a substantial documentation phase that adds 4 weeks to the timeline. It's non-negotiable, I replied. That's where Apex faltered. We document everything from day one. We train the team on every component. No single points of failure. Richard nodded. I'll take your word for it. Let's proceed. The next weeks were intense. We hired 5 more developers, including 2 who had recently left Apex. David built a database migration tool that could translate Apex's data structure into our new system. I designed a modular architecture that could scale with Horizon's needs. Halfway through the project, I received an email from Julia Finch, the former owner's daughter, who still sat on Apex's board. Simon, I want to apologize for how things concluded. The board was misled about the implications of letting you go. Marcus has been removed as CIO. We're struggling to recover, and Horizon's departure will hit us hard. If you're ever interested in returning, the door is open. I didn't respond. 10 weeks into our 14-week timeline, we were ready for a staged rollout. Horizon's smallest region, comprising 2,500 units in Southern California, would migrate first. If successful, the remaining regions would follow. The day before the migration, Richard called me into his office again. A familiar face was waiting. Charles Horizon himself. "So, you're the system architect," Charles said, standing to shake my hand. "Richard has told me a lot about you." "All good, I hope." Charles smiled. "He says you've built us something that won't malfunction every time we add a new property, something that will grow with us. That's the objective." "I also hear you used to work for Apex." I nodded, unsure where he was going with this. "They're in trouble, you know. The venture capital firm is trying to sell, but with Horizon leaving and their system still not fully functional, they're not finding many interested buyers." He paused. "Except one." "Who's that?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. "Strata Tech Systems," Richard said. "We're considering making an offer, at a substantial discount from what they were valued at 7 months ago." I looked between them, processing the implications. "If that happens," Charles continued, "we'd want someone who understands both companies to lead the integration. Someone who could salvage what's valuable from Apex's infrastructure while transitioning everything to your new architecture." "Are you asking if I'd be willing to work on that?" I clarified. Richard nodded. "Only if the acquisition proceeds, and only if you're comfortable with it." I thought about the irony. The system I'd built, the people I'd trained, the company that had discarded me, all potentially coming back under my direction. "I'd be willing," I said finally, "but I have one condition. We do it correctly. Comprehensive documentation, proper training, no shortcuts." "Agreed," Richard said. "We've learned that lesson." As I walked back to my office, I felt no vindication, no desire for revenge, just the simple satisfaction of knowing that good work, done right, eventually speaks for itself. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of what had once been Apex Property Solutions headquarters. The sign now read, "Stratotech Integrated Properties." The acquisition had gone through for less than a third of what the company had been valued at before my departure. Richard and I walked through the office, greeting former Apex employees who would be staying on through the transition. Some looked away awkwardly, others smiled with relief. A few, those who had worked closely with me over the years, nodded with quiet understanding. Marcus was gone, along with most of the executive team that had approved my termination. Julia Finch had stayed on as a consultant, helping ease the transition with legacy clients. When we reached the server room, my old domain, I paused. Through the glass, I could see the hardware I'd specified, the blinking lights of systems I'd designed. "Want to go in?" Richard asked. "No need," I replied. "We'll be migrating everything to the new infrastructure anyway." In the main conference room, the remaining Apex staff had gathered for the announcement. Richard introduced me as the chief integration architect who would be overseeing the technical transition. "Many of you already know Simon," he said. "He built the original systems that ran this company for nearly 2 decades. Now he'll be guiding us through the integration of both companies' technologies into something better than either had before." As I looked out at the faces, some familiar, some new, I felt no triumph, no desire to say, "I told you so." What would be the point? Instead, I spoke briefly about the transition plan, the timeline, the support that would be available to everyone during the process. I emphasized that no one would be left behind due to cost-cutting measures. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. 1 year after the acquisition, Stratatech Integrated Properties had become the largest property management company on the West Coast. The migration was complete, with all properties now running on the new system I designed, fully documented, properly staffed, and functioning smoothly. On a bright coastal morning, I drove to the office for a final meeting with Richard. The ocean breeze was a fitting backdrop for the conclusion of this chapter. "The board approved your proposal," Richard said as soon as I sat down. "The Technical Excellence Institute will launch next quarter. You'll have full autonomy to design the curriculum and hire instructors." This had been my condition for staying after the integration was complete. Not a higher title or more money, but the creation of a division dedicated to training the next generation of software architects and engineers, teaching them not just how to code, but how to build things meant to endure. "Thank you," I said. "That means a great deal." "No, thank you," Richard replied. "What you've built here is remarkable. Not just the technology, but the culture around it, the documentation, the knowledge sharing, the emphasis on quality over quick fixes." Later that afternoon, I cleared out my integration office. Unlike my hasty exit from Apex, this was a planned transition to my new role. As I packed my things, Julia Finch knocked on the door. "Got a moment?" she asked. We walked to the small balcony overlooking the ocean. "My father asked about you," she said. "He's retired in Arizona now, but he still follows company news. He was glad to hear you were back, in a manner of speaking." "How is Arthur?" I asked. "Good. Golfing a lot?" Julia paused. "He always said letting you go would be the biggest mistake this company could make. Turns out he was right." I nodded, unsure what to say. "I learned something from all this," Julia continued. "Value isn't always visible until it's gone." As I drove home along the coastline, I thought about value of experience, of care taken, of doing things right the first time, about systems built to last and the people who build them. I hadn't sought revenge. I hadn't needed to. I'd simply moved forward, building something better, something that would outlast any individual decision or short-term thinking. Sometimes the best response to being undervalued is simply to prove your worth elsewhere, and let the results speak for themselves.